Most of us grew up with a pretty polished picture of the American West. Cowboys riding into orange sunsets, dusty frontier towns where the sheriff always does the right thing, and wide open land just waiting to be discovered. But the real West, it wasn't clean and heroic. And it definitely wasn't peaceful. It was harsh and driven by hunger. Hunger for land, for violence, for power, and sometimes just survival. And few books rip away that polished image as completely as Cormac McCarthy did in his book Blood Meridian. Now, this book isn't exactly a cowboy adventure story. It's more like staring straight into the raw, unfiltered heat of history, where violence isn't shocking, it's simply the world as it was. Critics call this one of the greatest American novels ever written. Some call it unreadable because of how honest it is. And many readers finish it sitting in silence, just processing. And it all begins with a teenage boy. Now, the boy isn't a chosen one or a destined hero. He's just a 14-year-old kid who's born in Tennessee. There's no soft world around him. He grows up without any comfort or guidance, just drifting through towns and surviving. The kid runs away from his home and wanders through the deserts, fights in bars, learns to rely on his fists and instinct more than his words. And that's the thing about this character. McCarthy doesn't give him dramatic speeches or emotional confessions. He barely speaks at all. He learns by watching the world, and the world he sees teaches him hardness. He drifts south, eventually reaching Texas, right at the edge of a world boiling with conflict. Nations fighting over land, settlers pushing west, soldiers, indigenous tribes, bandits, mercenaries, everyone moving, clashing, crossing paths. It's a frontier where the rules haven't been written yet, and law doesn't really exist. Whoever has the gun or the knife or the strength decides what's right. And into that world, the kid steps like someone walking into a storm without even realizing it's coming. His first real turning point happens when he joins a group of ragtag fighters on the US-Mexico border. They think they're signing up for opportunity. Instead, they stumble into a nightmare. And that's where he meets someone who feels like he stepped out of myth, or maybe out of something older than myth. The judge. A towering, hairless man who speaks like a philosopher but moves through the world like violence is simply part of nature, not good or evil, just inevitable. He's charismatic in a way that's unsettling. People follow him not because they trust him, but because stepping out of his orbit feels dangerous. He fascinates people, and he frightens them. Every time he enters a scene, the energy changes. The world tilts, and the kid's journey, his choices, his path, his fate becomes tied to this figure in ways that feel almost mythic. But before the judge truly steps into the story, the kid's life becomes what this book is really known for. The journey through a landscape where war bands roam, settlements rise and fall overnight, and every horizon holds danger or opportunity. And everyone out here is deciding what kind of person they will become. Some become survivors. Some become monsters. Some can't tell the difference. This is the world the kid walks into, and we're about to follow him through it step by step. Through choices that shape him and break him, through moments of mercy and moments that feel almost mythically brutal. By the end, you'll understand why this book is considered both a masterpiece and a test, a story that reaches back into history to ask a question as old as humanity. Is violence something we learn, or something we return to because it's always been there? And with that, let's ride to the borderlands where the kid's fate and ours as readers begin to shift. So the kid reaches Texas, young enough to still have hope, but shaped enough by hardship that trouble finds him easily. And violence isn't something shocking to him. It's almost like background noise in his life. He doesn't seek it out with pride, but he doesn't avoid it either. It's just something he knows the world is made of. And that's the unsettling thing about him. You don't see a villain in these early moments. You just see someone who hasn't been taught another way to exist. He drifts into little frontier towns, stays where he can, works odd jobs, gets into bar fights that start over practically nothing. The way people fought when life was small and harsh and the world didn't punish you for lashing out. Eventually, he crosses into the borderlands, into that thin edge between Texas and Mexico where men dream big and die fast. That's where he meets Captain White. Captain White is one of those historical characters who feels almost like a warning sign. Convinced he's chosen to reshape history. White's selling a vision of greatness. He talks about spreading American ideals. But let's be honest, he wants land, fame, and control. The kid doesn't join because he believes in any of that. He doesn't give speeches, he doesn't ask questions. He just sees a chance to move, to belong, to have a direction. Sometimes the biggest decisions in life aren't made with passion, just momentum. So he signs up. And here's where the story shifts, because this isn't a patriotic army marching into a noble cause. This is a ragtag filibuster group mercenaries dressed up as patriots, riding south into Mexico under the illusion of purpose. They march across these sprawling, sunburned landscapes, and McCarthy describes the land in a way that feels alive. The horizon doesn't welcome them. After days of marching, hunger kicking in, spot riders in the distance assume it's a confused or scared group of Mexicans to push past. Instead, they run into something else entirely. Comanche warriors, fast, fearless, and terrifyingly organized. They don't appear like bandits or scattered fighters. They come like a wave. That scene in the book is famous. The Comanches appear not as villains or heroes, but as a force of nature. Painted horses, bright feathers, war cries, and this explosive speed that instantly erases whatever confidence Captain White had tried to build. One moment, this little army is marching under speeches about glory. The next moment, they're being ripped apart. It's sudden. It's overwhelming. Men scream, run, fall, vanish in dust and hooves, and the kid sees what the West truly is. He barely escapes. Some don't. The world doesn't pause for the dead. From there, the kid wanders wounded through miles of harsh country until he eventually ends up among survivors and prisoners, drifting through ruins of what was supposed to be a grand patriotic mission. And that's when the judge steps back into his life. He's just there, calm, smiling, observing like he knew this would happen all along. That's the strange part about him. Everyone else bleeds and begs and panics, but the judge stands in chaos the way some people stand in a library, searching for knowledge instead of fearing the storm. Even wounded and exhausted, the kid notices him, not because the judge shouts or commands attention, but because he feels like gravity. He doesn't pull people in with kindness or fear. He pulls them in with certainty. And the judge finds a new group to join the Glanton Gang, Scalphunters, operating legally on paper, brutally in reality, paid in coin for every scalp they bring back. It's one of the darkest economic deals ever written in literature, a government placing value on violence and turning men into predators. The kid joins them not out of loyalty, not out of desire, but because once again, he's following motion. This world doesn't offer many paths, and the ones it does rarely have signs. So he rides with them. A teenager in a group of men who chase death for money. And as they move forward, deeper into deserts, villages, territories full of fear, the judge watches everything and says things that sound poetic one moment and chilling the next. He sketches nature, collects samples, studies languages, jokes with children, and yet you feel it. Something monumental and frightening inside him. This isn't just a leader or philosopher, he's something else entirely. Something ancient, like an idea walking in human shape. And the kid, he rides beside him, not knowing yet that this journey isn't just physical. It's moral. It's existential. It's the kind of story where every choice, even the quiet ones, builds towards something inevitable. So the kid rides with the Glanton Gang, and their purpose is simple: hunt hostile Apache groups and bring back scalps for payment. That's the government's deal, a price on human heads. And once you introduce money into violence, lines don't just blur, they disappear. The gang rides across huge stretches of barren land, and McCarthy always pulls you into the landscape. The land isn't a backdrop in this book. It's like a silent judge. Vast deserts, lonely mountains, heat that feels like punishment. Some days they ride for hours without speaking. Just dust, hooves, sun, and silence. Then out of nowhere, violence erupts without warning or rhythm. That randomness is important. McCarthy refuses to let violence feel theatrical or choreographed. It's messy, confusing, and often senseless, which, honestly, is closer to how the world works when society hasn't built fences around behavior yet. And slowly, you start seeing the kid's difference. He isn't a saint. He fights, he kills, he follows orders. But there are moments where he hesitates, where he shows mercy, or at least uncertainty. He's not trying to be good. He just hasn't fully hardened himself the way others have. And the judge sees it. That's the unsettling undercurrent the judge is always observing, always analyzing people the way a scientist might study a new species. And there's something in the kid that bothers him. Not rebellion, just the possibility that a human being could look at brutality and still choose restraint. To the judge, that's almost offensive. Meanwhile, the gang falls deeper into the rhythm of this world, scalp money coming in, blood feeding blood, and violence becoming not just survival, but identity. And when a group starts to define themselves through violence, it becomes hard to stop. Every victory blurs into the next, every kill becomes just part of riding forward. Sometimes they ride into peaceful villages, welcomed by people who think they're allies, and the gang leaves chaos behind. It's cold. The judge is always charismatic, always present. He tells stories around the fire, plays fiddle for children, lectures about the nature of power like he's explaining the weather. And the men laugh with him, follow him. He makes cruelty sound rational. Civilization, he says, is just a thin coat of paint and the desert strips it off fast. Every once in a while, someone tries to challenge him, and you see it. He doesn't get angry, he just smiles like he already knows how the game ends. The kid rarely speaks to him. He listens, he observes, because deep down he knows this man is dangerous in a way that doesn't require shouting or guns, because he sees humanity's darkest impulses not as flaws, but as nature. And yet, the kid doesn't leave. He rides on, maybe because he has nowhere else to go. Maybe because leaving isn't as easy as it sounds when the wilderness stretches 1,000 miles in every direction. There's a moment where a wounded enemy lies on the ground, helpless. And while others around the kid see opportunity, the kid hesitates. He just chooses not to cross a line. And make no mistake, the judge notices. To him, neutrality is rebellion. Mercy is defiance. And in a world where he believes all existence is war, someone refusing to surrender fully to brutality isn't just irritating, it's dangerous. That's the quiet thread tying these characters together. Not hatred, not rivalry, just difference. And the judge's belief that difference must be erased. Meanwhile, the gang grows richer, more reckless, more feared. Towns whisper their name before they arrive. Soldiers look the other way. The only thing more terrifying than their cruelty is how casual it becomes. Men aren't shocked by violence anymore. And in that emptiness, the routine of violence, you start to see what McCarthy's pointing at. When humans lose purpose and anchor, destruction doesn't just become easy. It becomes entertainment. But through all the dust and blood and firelight, the kid keeps a tiny ember inside him. Not goodness, just a sliver of self that refuses to dissolve completely into the world around him. They ride through sun-bleached passes and burned-out villages, through rivers swollen with spring melt and canyon shadows where sound travels strangely. And as they move, the land around them feels ancient, not like a wild frontier waiting for settlers, but like a world that existed long before humans and will exist long after them. Every town they pass seems caught between fear and trembling hope. Some hope these men will protect them. Others pray they just keep riding. The Glanton Gang is paid to fight hostile tribes, but the line between enemy and anyone with a scalp worth money gets thinner every mile. And the gang crosses that line quietly at first, then boldly, then as if it never existed. Villages they were trusted to defend become places they plunder. Innocence isn't weighed or considered. Profit decides who lives and who dies. What makes McCarthy's writing so unsettling isn't the violence itself, it's what people become when violence turns into currency. Some of the men brag after raids, some drink until they forget. Some stare into the fire like they're trying to remember who they were before they crossed whatever line they crossed. And some, like the judge, look at the chaos with a calm satisfaction, as if the world finally makes sense. At night around the fire, the judge talks. He talks about war as if it's the natural state of existence. He talks about fate, freedom, control, about how everything that exists must either rule or be ruled. And people listen, because even if they don't understand him completely, they feel the gravity in his words. He doesn't preach violence, he simply removes the illusion that peace is natural. To him, peace is the trick. Violence is the truth underneath. Just knowing like he's holding the final page of a story you haven't read yet. Meanwhile, the kid listens in silence. He doesn't challenge, doesn't philosophize, he just hears, watching, measuring. And if you've ever seen someone grow up too fast, you recognize this feeling, that quiet internal decision of what kind of person am I going to become. One night, after a raid, the gang rests in a burned-out Mexican settlement. Smoke still hangs over the stones. Someone in the group finds survivors hiding a couple of frightened villagers. The others see easy money. But before anything happens, the kid steps in, not loudly, just enough to shift fate by an inch. He mutters something like, "Let them be." Some of the gang scoff. Some don't care. The judge never yells. He never threatens. He doesn't need to. The way he studies the kid says enough. Why won't you surrender to the truth I see? It's a disagreement about what a human being should be. The judge believes man must dominate, must control, must erase doubt. The funny thing is, the kid himself doesn't think he's noble. He doesn't even see himself as special. In fact, he probably thinks he's as stained as any of them. But sometimes, the smallest refusal carries the greatest weight. The gang keeps moving, carving a bloody trail, until their reputation begins to precede them in a dangerous way. The same forces that paid them now whisper about stopping them. In towns they pass, shutters close, people hide their children. And the Wild West, which once felt endless, begins to feel like a narrowing corridor. And in the midst of all this, the dust, the fear, the slow creeping curse that follows the gang, the judge grows almost joyful. Not happy, but fulfilled. As if the world is aligning exactly the way he says it must. But the kid? He's changing in a different direction. He still rides with them, but there's something inside him that hasn't rotted. It's fascinating how McCarthy does this. He doesn't tell you someone is losing their soul. He shows you who manages to keep even a sliver of one. And out on those plains, under immense sky, with stars burning like ancient watchfires, a question starts forming quietly. If the world demands brutality, does choosing not to be brutal make you weak, or does it make you the strongest one there? The answer, in this world, isn't obvious, and it's going to carry consequences. The fall begins. The Glanton Gang thinks they're unstoppable. They think violence is gravity inevitable, universal, and on their side. But empires don't fall in one moment. They rot first. They're rotting from the inside. The Mexican towns that once paid them gold now see them as a plague walking, more like exhaustion of the soul. When even killing stops numbing you, what's left? Meanwhile, the judge is thriving. Chaos is his oxygen, and the world is giving him a full tank. He doesn't swing a blade often, he swings ideas instead. Questions about fate, destiny, God, freedom, and every time someone in the gang doubts him, somehow he turns their doubt into loyalty. He's not trying to win their minds, he's colonizing them. The kid stays quiet. He sees the kid's humanity like a crack in a mirror, a flaw. And flaws, the judge doesn't allow flaws to live. The men ride through deserts that look like dried bone. Storms tear the sky open like the earth itself is judging them. Every thunderstrike feels like God watching and refusing to interfere. The kid doesn't stand up and shout. That's not how real moral wars happen. They happen in silence. He just starts choosing, looking away from senseless cruelty, not laughing at the judge's truths, holding on to a shred of mercy like a dying flame. But in a world where evil is absolute, a whisper of good becomes a scream. And the judge, he hears it. He hates it. Because the judge believes freedom exists only in total violence. A man who chooses not to kill destroys the judge's philosophy. It's about the soul of one boy versus the worldview of a god monster. The kid doesn't know it yet, but he's already chosen his side and the judge has marked him for it. By this point, the gang has burned through Mexico like a fever, reputation ruined, gold drying up, enemies multiplying faster than bullets. And when men who only know violence run out of targets, they turn inward. You start to feel it, that unnerving quiet before things break. They're still riding, still laughing, still drinking, but now there's a tremor underneath, like laughter, that's one bad look away from a gunfight. Even the land feels hostile. Now dust storms, cracked riverbeds, heat that feels alive. McCarthy makes the West feel like it's rejecting them, almost spitting them back out. Crossing Glanton sees a ferry business there. And this is peak Glanton brain logic. Instead of thinking, hey, maybe we should lay low, regroup, he goes, let's kill the ferry owners and take their livelihood. And they do, and steal the ferry like it's a horse. Just impulse, ego, and opportunity. And this is where karma or fate, or whatever power still has patience left, finally wakes up. Because those ferrymen, they were Yuma tribe allies, and the Yuma aren't the type to shrug and say, oh well. They come back with rage older than the desert. When the attack hits, it's chaos. Spears, knives, it's a brutal wipeout. Glanton falls, most of the gang goes with him. The Glanton Gang, this terrifying machine of violence, just evaporates in a moment. And it doesn't feel triumphant. It feels like watching a storm die in silence. Men destroyed by the same violence they worshipped. And the kid? He survives. Because fate still has business with him. The judge survives too. Of course he does. Monsters like him don't die in group battles. The kid sees him afterwards standing untouched like the chaos was wind passing around him. No wounds, no sweat, just that same eerie calm. And there's this moment not spoken, not dramatic, where you realize the story is narrowing now. The gang was noise, distraction. Now it's just them. A boy trying to remember he's human, and a man who believes humanity is a myth for the weak. The rest of the journey feels like wandering through the remains of a war only they remember. The kid keeps moving, keeps breathing, but he's different now. But the judge, he doesn't forgive defections. He doesn't believe in walking away. And you can feel him watching, not in anger, in certainty. Like he knows all unfinished philosophy is worse than unfinished war. Themes quietly shift here. Up until now, the violence was external. Now it turns internal. Guilt without confession. Morality without religion. Fate versus choice. That terrifying question, if you've lived by blood, can you ever leave it behind? McCarthy doesn't hand you answers. He just leaves you walking beside the kid, breathing dust and dread, hoping that one tiny thread of humanity survives this story. And that's what makes this part powerful. The kid isn't the same boy who ran away from Tennessee anymore. He's someone who has seen evil, walked with it, taken orders from it, and is now trying to decide if he deserves his own soul back. Not many stories let characters earn humanity like this painfully, without reward. Wandering through the ghost of a life. The Glanton Gang is gone. What was once a roaring engine of blood and swagger has burned itself out. It's just silence and dust. And the kid, he walks out of it, just alive in a world that suddenly feels way too big and way too empty. He becomes a drifter again, almost like life is offering him a reset. But here's the thing with trauma, it doesn't care where you travel. It walks behind you, sometimes beside you. And when you've lived inside violence long enough, quiet can be louder than gunfire. He grows older, becomes the man now, not the kid. He drinks, works odd jobs, sleeps under roofs when he can, under stars when he can't. He doesn't brag about where he's been, he doesn't have to. There's something in his eyes that tells the story. He's still capable of violence, he knows it. We know it, but he doesn't chase it anymore. And that's maybe the greatest rebellion in this book, but the story won't let him forget. Because in a dusty town, in a tavern, on a night like any other, guess who shows up? The judge. The judge hasn't aged, not a wrinkle, not a hint of time. He looks like he walked straight out of the desert and through the years without touching the ground. Same calm face, same unsettling calm, like time itself is scared to touch him. There's no dramatic standoff here. The judge speaks in that eerie, philosophical way, comparing life to war, men to instruments, fate to dance, choice to illusion. He believes nothing exists outside conflict. He believes a man either dominates the world or is swallowed by it. He believes the kid, the man, betrayed the order of violence by showing mercy. And he hasn't forgotten. The kid doesn't lecture him back. He listens, quietly, like someone who has already fought this fight inside himself 100 times. And here's the subtle brilliance. He refuses the judge's philosophy simply by not returning to it. You don't hate the judge because he's the villain. You fear him because he feels beyond human rules, like a force that demands humanity stay in chains. This conversation is the most dangerous moment so far, because McCarthy is asking something bigger than will the kid survive. He's asking, can someone who was born into violence ever truly escape it? And if they do, does the world let them go? We're right on the edge now. The next part takes us into the chilling final confrontation, the saloon, the judge's final truth. And the moment readers don't debate to this day what really happens in that outhouse. We're stepping into one of the most analyzed endings in American literature. And it's not about violence, it's about meaning. He heads into a saloon for warmth, drink, and the simple human comfort of being near other living souls. There's music, laughing, men slapping cards on a table, the kind of normal life he never got to have. And for a moment, just a moment, it feels like maybe the world has moved on. Maybe brutality really can fade into memory. He sits, drinks quietly, keeps to himself, and then he sees him. Not entering with a bang, not demanding attention, just there in the room like he always was. The judge, same smooth face, same unsettling calm, bald, pale, smiling like the world is one long private joke that only he understands. No change. The kid looks and the judge smiles like he's greeting an old student who finally came back for the last lesson. The judge talks, Not loudly, not angrily, softly, with that cruel patience. He talks about war again, about violence, about men who deny their nature. He speaks like a preacher of blood, and the saloon doesn't even realize a sermon is happening. And the kid answers, finally not with poetry or philosophy, but plain human resistance. He tells the judge he's wrong, that not everything is war, that a man can walk away. And it's quiet. Just two men who once traveled through hell, staring across a table, knowing they can't both walk forward in this world. The judge doesn't get angry. He just smiles wider, like a man who never doubted the ending. The kid leaves. He walks through the saloon crowd and out into the cold, like someone choosing life over myth. But fate doesn't fade just because you turn your back on it. He goes to the outhouse, a simple, ugly little shack, one of the most infamous settings in American literature. We don't see what happens inside. McCarthy never spells it out. All we get is aftermath. Someone opens the door. They recoil. They slam it shut. They swear and shudder. Whatever they saw was horrifying. The kid, the man is dead. Gone. And then, back inside, life keeps going. Cards slap tables, drinks pour, the piano starts again. The judge steps onto the floor and dances, laughing, shouting, he will never die. A childlike monster celebrating eternity. Readers argue endlessly. Did the judge kill him? Was the kid punished for mercy? Was the judge always something more than human, a devil, a force, a law of nature? Did the kid win spiritually even if he lost physically? There's no single answer. McCarthy doesn't give those. But here's one understanding most people feel. Maybe the judge won in the physical sense, dancing forever in his bloody gospel. Or maybe the judge is dancing out of fear because one man, even one, proved that violence isn't destiny. Maybe the kid's small flame, stubborn, quiet, imperfect, is the thing the judge can't stand. Because if even one soul walks away from violence, his whole universe trembles. And that's why this book endures. Blood Meridian isn't trying to comfort you. It isn't trying to shock you. It just tells the truth about power, cruelty, choice, and the thin, painful thread of humanity we hold onto in spite of it all. The West here isn't about freedom. It's about the terrifying fact that humans are capable of anything, and also rarely, quietly capable of walking away. So the dust settles. The kid is gone. The judge is still dancing. And now we step back and ask, not as critics or professors, but as human beings. What did we just witness? And why does it feel like something ancient woke up while we read it? The West was never clean. Most Westerns give you sunsets, dusty heroes, justice, courage. McCarthy reminds us, the West wasn't a shining promise, it was a battlefield we romanticized later. It wasn't cowboys singing under stars, it was men carving territory out of bone and sand and calling it destiny. This book doesn't destroy the myth of the West, it shows the truth the myth was built to hide. And when you see that truth, you can't unsee it. The kid isn't a saint. He's done terrible things, walked through hell with open eyes. But somewhere in him, under all the violence and scars, there's a small voice that refuses to die. A simple, stubborn instinct. Don't become them. No speeches. No shining hero moment. Sometimes he walks away instead of killing. Sometimes he helps instead of hurting. Sometimes he just says nothing, and that silence is rebellion. In a world worshipping blood, silence becomes a prayer. And that's what makes him powerful. Not strength, not victory, but resistance. Even quiet resistance shakes monsters. The judge, when violence learns to speak. The judge doesn't just kill. He explains, he justifies. He turns brutality into philosophy. He believes peace is a lie. Mercy is weakness. Fate is violence. To live is to dominate. Anyone who denies this must be erased. He is the voice of history's darkest truths, the part humanity tries not to look at when we admire monuments and nations. He's not a cartoon villain. He's the part of mankind that looks at morality and laughs. He's charismatic, charming, calm, rational. Real evil doesn't always foam at the mouth. Sometimes it smiles and dances. That's why the judge feels immortal. He's not just one man in one story. He's every empire, every tyrant, every ideology that justified cruelty by calling it truth. Violence is easy. Mercy is hard. A lot of people think the book says violence is inevitable. But look closer. Violence fills the pages, sure, but meaning fills the spaces in between. The one thing the kid does that matters? He chooses not to kill. That's it. Simple. Human. unremarkable to the world around him, but monumental to him. Because in a world where violence is language, choosing silence is defiance. And that's why the judge never forgives him. You might expect a moral, a lesson, a reward for goodness or punishment for cruelty. McCarthy gives none. Instead, he gives a mirror. He asks, "What do you make of this? Did the kid lose? Or did he win by keeping even a sliver of humanity? Did the judge triumph? Or did he rage against a truth he can never fully erase that someone walked away from his religion of violence?" The ending is disturbing not because it answers questions, but because it refuses to. You close the book and feel the silence of the desert in your chest, like a question you'll carry forever. In a world capable of infinite brutality, can a single act of mercy matter? Every great story has a character that stops feeling like a character. They cross that line. They stop being just words on paper, and they start living rent-free in human imagination. For the American West, it's Judge Holden. And the scariest part, he doesn't need claws or magic or jump scares. He has something far worse. People always ask, was the judge even human? Or was he a demon or a god or a metaphor? You can debate him however you want with religion, history, or philosophy. But the thing that really chills every reader is that he's possible. We've seen men like him in history, men who believed violence was nature, men who looked at conquest like it was holy, men who never hesitated, never questioned, never blinked at cruelty. He genuinely believes he's correct. That's the most dangerous villain you can write. Not the man who knows he's wrong, the man who thinks he's fate. At his core, the judge has one doctrine. Everything in the world must belong to someone, preferably him. Knowledge, own it. History, rewrite it. People, dominate them. Dominate their body, mind, and soul. Violence isn't a tool to him. It's the natural state of the universe. War is the truest form of divination. He doesn't just believe conflict exists, he believes conflict is holy. He believes every man who tries to live peacefully is committing a kind of betrayal, a denial of truth. And that's why the kid threatens him. The kid's tiny spark of compassion, that quiet refusal, is like a slap to the face of the judge's entire worldview. The judge doesn't kill him because he hates him. He kills him because he can't allow mercy to exist. You don't just remove enemies, you remove contradiction.